got it. It became quite apparent that the employers wanted or had to be dragged kicking and screaming to make such a simple statement as "we value our staff." It kind of beggars a belief that that's the case. You don't need me to tell you what an integral part of our NHS ethnic minority doctors, both from within the UK and from abroad, have made to our NHS. It is this cultural diversity that we have in our NHS that makes not only our society the service more relevant to its communities, but just enriches both the NHS and our society. And every time that I speak, I want to remind people that international medical graduates are welcome and an essential part of our workforce, and therefore deserve our thanks and full support. Doctors inherently are at higher risk of suicide than the rest of the population. You kind of have to be a doctor or living with doctors to understand exactly what the stresses of being a doctor are at the best of times, let alone at the worst of times that we find ourselves in our NHS currently. We know that a number of people have taken their lives while under the GMC's fitness to practice process. The GMC, as Anit just referred to, in March 2022, published its own report on deaths of doctors under investigation. It's even worse for Black and ethnic minority doctors. And that terrible experience of working in the NHS starts in the workplace with the significantly increased chance of them being bullied, worse career progression. We talked about the gender pay gap yesterday at BAPIO, for example. And ethnic minority doctors are 3 times more likely to be referred to the GMC if they are international medical graduates. We've been highlighting the need to be more open and transparent and to look at systems, since the time of Mid-Staff and then the Francis inquiry. So this comes from Don Berwick, right, about how a toxic fear environment just is so negative to safety and the idea of us getting improvements going within our health service. But that needs to carry across to our regulatory systems. And if it doesn't carry across to our regulatory systems, we are not going to make progress with safety. That's 10 years ago. I suspect you can do a lot of talking this afternoon about whether things have changed, how little they've changed, and really how to make a difference now. Chand did a lot of work Chand Nagpal, who is on the call, and if he's not on the call, he'll be talking later as well. Chand initiated a lot of surveys and reports to formally document just how dire and discriminatory the system is. 95% of doctors are sometimes or often fearful of making a mistake daily. It is our business. We are in a high-risk situation where mistakes and errors happen. It is how we and the system around us deals with that that is so important, and we are constantly failing to learn lessons from that. What is really disappointing is just how miserably we failed to change the culture. We are still in a situation where an individual is unfairly blamed for errors or things that have gone on, and that causes us not only to practice defensively, but it encourages the system around us to be defensive as well. We kind of then lose sight about what the system is there for, i.e. patients, and then to make sure that the staff can practice as themselves in the best way that they possibly can. The number of people who are content to report errors or mistakes is pathetically low. You know, there is still an atmosphere of fear and of blame. And until we shift that fundamentally into an environment of learning, not only will we not make progress in the workplace, but I doubt we'll make significant progress with the regulators who are so dependent on what comes out of the workplace to judge and to review and then to act. And I think that this is the area where we can do a lot of things before regulation comes into play. So, you know, 10 years on, we haven't actually made that much progress, I would suggest to you, which is why this kind of meeting, this kind of pressure, this kind of highlighting of just how wrong the system is so important. And I'm hoping to learn even more and for you to guide me as to how to keep pressure up on the GMC. So here's a case in point. Dr. Bauer-Garber was on the end of a situation in which she was set up to make or be part of an error. And instead of focusing on the 79 actions that could have taken place within the trust, someone was put through a system wrongly and unnecessarily. And that's one of the frustrations that I've had, is that the number of times the GMC has said to me, it has no choice. It is, you know, this is something that its rules mandate it to do if the referral is portrayed in a particular way. I just don't buy that. I don't believe it. And I don't believe there's not more that we can do about it. So, you know, we know that there are differential referral rates for doctors to the GMC. We know, because we hear stories, I hear stories all the time of the GMC threat being weaponized. We've heard it perhaps most recently in relation to the Lucy Letby case in Chester. And I know Omar's going to talk later on about his own situation, perhaps. But you know, there is discrimination in the referral process. What I get a sense is that the GMC is accepting that discrimination now exists, but I don't sense that it's getting a move on with doing anything about it. There is a lack of objectivity in whether to investigate or refer back. And I think that that's one of the places that most bias seems to creep in. And we know that there are some trusts that have vastly higher referral rates than others. But it's how you are told, how you are dealt with by the GMC. I don't know of any doctor who, at the mention of the word, I've got a letter from the GMC, doesn't have a palpable increase in their heart rate, because it is something that instills fear, because there is uncertainty. There is uncertainty about how you will be dealt with. So however much the GMC says and tries to tell us that it has robust processes, that isn't what people feel in reality. And you know, it's the whole of the pathway has examples of cases where it has failed, right? You know, it's just that you know, the kind of oxymoron that there is about saying, you know, it's all a neutral process. You know, it is anything but if you are on the receiving end of this, because of the disclosures that are then made to employers. And that sense that the GMC is there to find evidence to prove its point, rather than seeking the truth. And it's so one-sided, it feels to me. I went to the MPTS to spend a day witnessing how it was constructed, how it was delivered, and it just the adversarial nature of it just has to change. You know, what we want to do is be in a position where people are de facto trying to find the truth and to have that truth applied consistently. And of course, the process then can ruin people's lives for various periods of time while they are waiting for both investigation and for the tribunal service to go to MPTS process to go through. And we are very poor at supporting doctors overall. We are trying our best. So, you know, as you know, the BMA has support services, but it's very, very easy to become isolated in this process. And I look forward to the discussion about what it really feels like to be on that end of that. Probably the biggest thing that I have difficulty with is that the GMC tells me all the time that its function is to determine whether a doctor is safe to practice at any particular time. And all of the examples that we've seen in the press and in the headlines, they just don't feel that that is the motivation behind the decision and the punishment that has been meted out. So, now, if you take Manjula's situation about conversations about laptops, you know, I don't know of any doctor stroke consultant who doesn't try and put their case for equipment or services or things that they need to do their job in the best frame that they can put it. And you know, that just seemed not only completely wrong to me, but completely out of proportion. And the GMC doesn't always, but actually makes a big deal about saying it doesn't pursue cases where people are on the end of an individual error or mistake. And yet we've seen cases where that's exactly the case. In my experience as a teacher of human factors, the one person who's not going to make the mistake again is the person who's made the mistake. Now, everyone else around them is likely to make that mistake, but that person very rarely makes it. And as Anith said, you know, actually, the number of people who set out with intent to cause harm or who are genuinely not behaving in the manner to which everyone would expect the GMC to intervene is really very small. You know, and because of that, Dr. Aurora was subject to, you know, really horrendous kind of attempt to bully her under cross-examination. And at the end of it, everyone said, well, of course, you know, she's of good character, but they still wanted to sanction her because of sending a message to the public and the profession. Well, I'm not sure what message that was saying. In fact, actually, if anything, it said completely the opposite to what they were trying to get across. And that, you know, leaves the MPTS questionable as to how it interprets that meaning of public confidence. And I'm not sure that the regulatory reform that is being mooted does anything to address that. So, you know, obviously the GMC has been found to be racially discriminating against doctors. I'll leave it to Omar to tell you more about his landmark ruling. It instills fear and panic. That is the difficulty because of this adversarial approach, and it needs to change, right? And I really want to listen to people as to, if you think, and if you want to make a statement of fact that the BMA is not doing enough on this front, then help us to do more. I'm quite happy to put the strongest views that we can to the GMC to make a difference. They have acknowledged that they need to gain more compassion. They have acknowledged a deficiency in cultural competency. What we need to do is to make sure that that does change and doesn't remain just a list of words. You know, it all links in, doesn't it, about the system that we work in and how civil or incivil and how we talk and treat each other. And you are aware of the way that we are in the workplace affects our success and our behaviours. So it has a direct effect on behaviours and patient safety. BMA has got new policy on this. It is looking predominantly at trying to get anonymisation of referrals. It kind of works both ways, and I'm interested in hearing this afternoon about the pushback that I've had from the GMC, who say if you anonymise the referral completely, how do you maintain cultural competency? And the question, I'm glad that Anise is smiling at that one, because I just can't believe it. But the issue here is, and again, help please, it's often cited that there is evidence that anonymisation leads to improvement. And it's often quoted that it's Prof. Emmanuel in the, I think it's Eastern region, but no one can find that evidence. So the GMC is claiming that it can't actually find the evidence, but it does allow us to have 2 points of entry to anonymisation. One is at the point of referral and lies within trusts and health boards. The other is at the point of the GMC dealing with it. And I think that those are perhaps separate but related, but they give 2 pressure points of where we can apply pressure to get change. And this is basically the starting point for the rest of the conversation for this afternoon. A process that was designed to protect patients has failed miserably to protect the doctors that are trying their best in really difficult circumstances to care. Not only the technical circumstances of medicine's difficult enough at the best of times, but those in that environment that we've ended up in and the increasing stresses that we are faced with every day. So I'm going to stop there, Anise, and I'll take questions if you want.
Yeah, that was very, very helpful, Phil. And I think you absolutely set out why the right to life, which seems very dramatic, but it sets out very clearly the problems that many of us will face if the GMC decides to investigate things. So that was very, very helpful. As I explained to you at the beginning, we have 3 components of the charter. So what I'll do is that if you want to ask questions of Phil related to what he said, let's deal with that now, and post your question on the chat, and then I can be informed by the organizers of those questions, because there's over 100 participants now, 108 so far. So it's going to be very difficult to sort of get any ordering to it. And if we can just direct your comments at Phil regarding what he said, and then we can move on to the second part of the charter. And then what we'll do is we'll have a much greater discussion when you've heard all 3 really. And I think that might be the best way to do this. So if we can just get Phil's questions in, any questions to Phil. So let me, I can see on my screen so far, Lydia. Would you like to ask Phil anything, Lydia? So the organizers can unmute her, and then she can ask a question.
I lost the picture in front of me, but what I wanted to ask is, because you mentioned that the GMC is unlikely to seek the truth rather than seeking evidence to penalize the doctor. I myself have experienced that when a doctor is referred to the GMC without following the procedure of making first an internal hospital inquiry, how does the GMC react on that? I mean, how do they search the truth, whether I have being referred to the GMC directly without any imminent threat to a patient or any evidence of dying patient or anything drastic which has happened. So
Okay,
I
I see the point, Lydia. Yeah, let's just hold that thought, because there is this issue about you know, why local investigations aren't carried out and they're direct referrals, and that is something that has been brought out in quite a lot of the recent cases, which the GMC has then failed on and found to be wanting. So we'll just hold that thought. Can I take two more questions, and then hopefully we can get Phil to answer them. So Shabi, you were next on my list. I may have got this wrong, so apologies, because I can't see everyone on the screen. But Shabi, his hand has come up. So Shabi, do you want to just ask a question? And then I'll go to Narinder after that, and then we'll take a pause for Phil to answer. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Phil, for a very enlightening presentation. And you mentioned the issue of anonymization by the GMC, and we've had a discussion about it previously as well. So funny enough, I was in a GMC EDI meeting recently, and I raised this issue with the GMC. And for once, GMC was found to be a bit defensive on this, and they were not adverse to the idea of enforcing the anonymization. And I did raise the issue of funding again, and they say that yes, the funding is not an inevitable issue, and they can find ways and means to do it. So the GMC has promised that they will look into the anonymization issue. How much we can trust them on that, I don't know, but surely it does seem that the issue is not completely dead, and they might come around and have the anonymization, which in turn will help a lot in terms of a fair play process.
Okay, Shabi. So just hold that then, and then the last question, because I mean, I'm very conscious of timing. So I'll ask Narendra, then we'll take the three questions, which Phil can then answer, and then we'll move on to the next bit of the thing. Okay, so Narendra.
Yeah, I'll just make a few points. I've got more general points I can make later, but I think that first of all, I think that the GMC should, when it gets a death, or maybe a major adverse event, but certainly a death in relation to its processes, it should automatically trigger an external independent investigation. Well, what it did was it did an internal investigation after Dr. Sures's death, but it should, so that's one thing, it should automatically trigger an external independent one. I think it's important to remember that we're talking about false positive referrals by the GMC, things where it has maybe investigated and shouldn't have, but there are also cases of false negative. That is where the GMC should have investigated and they refused to. And then the last point I'd just like to make is that I think the BMA could look at all work-related deaths of doctors. So doctors who die, whether it's suicide or anything else, in relating to work. So, we had a case in Scotland where the doctor was going home after a late night shift and she crashed her car and died as a result. So I think that looking at deaths in general in relation to workplace is something that the BMA could do.
Okay, so there's 3 points then. So Lydia's point was the one about no local investigation. And then Chevy's point was about the anonymization, and Narinder was a bit more complicated. But if you can take those 3, Phil, then we'll move on. And just for those of you, I know that some people have put hands up, and I'm not going to take you because I want to move on to the next bit. But what we'll do for when we have the questioning at the end of the doctor's charter, if you post your question on the chat, and then Ifat, who's one of the organizers, will read it out. And that way we'll get everyone hopefully organized, because it's very difficult on one screen. There's so many people. I have to keep shifting the screens to identify whose hand is up. That's not going to be feasible. So we'll take those 3, Phil, and then we'll take it from and go on to the next bit then, Phil.
Yeah, so the in principle there is a process that is to be followed, and in fact the process has been modified so that local resolution is supposed to take place much more commonly and reasonably. There is a disconnect between the process and people's experience of it. So a lot of things get reported to us that should have happened that haven't happened. But if you talk to the GMC, they say we have increased the number of people for whom local resolution is the answer. Shabi, with the anonymization, the GMC is sort of says that it is listening. It is saying that it wants to change. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but it's by keeping pressure up and by keep reminding them that we will actually make progress in this, and it's important that they know we're not going away, and important that you're not going away. Navinder, the issue about false negatives is really important, because that's the most hurtful bit, all right? And that is where you've got people who are being referred knowing that there are other people who seem to be doing worse things around them and who get away with it, for want of a better phrase. Now, that's about getting consistency and getting objective processes in place. I'm not averse, once I can get the industrial action and the COVID inquiry and physicians associates all sorted out, to looking at doctor deaths in the workforce. I think it's an important piece of work that still needs to be done. I agree with you, the BMA is best placed to do that as well.
Okay, so that's really great, Phil, and thank you for an excellent presentation, which I think sets the scene very clearly for us. Just for me to sort of summarize and just add a couple of things. The point about the false negatives, Narendra, is really, really important, because I think this is where the greatest discrimination takes place, you see, even if you have local investigation. And in fact, my first piece of research about the GMC in 1993 showed exactly that. Paradoxically, the actual tribunal process was fair. There was no differential treatment, because it's almost a quasi-legal process. I know all the points Phil makes about it's very the barristers just go for you and all that sort of stuff. But that is once it becomes a court of law, it's sort of fairer. But it's what happens before that. And I'm not saying that that's all right, but I'm just saying that there's a huge amount of cases that happen which are never referred, unless you're an ethnic minority, and it goes on. So I think that was the point. And I think that the general point about the way that the GMC operates, I think is so well described, I think, by Phil, that it's certainly worth holding on to what he said, those things. So I think this session is being recorded, so I don't know what they're going to do afterwards, but those of you who know others who might be interested in what Phil says and so on, I'm sure we'll be able to have a look at the slides later on. So what I want to move on now is the second part of the charter, which is the doctor's right not to suffer unnecessary investigations. And we're going to have 3 people who are going to deal with this, talk about this, I think mainly from personal experience. The first one is Jo Jones, who I think is going to talk about her experience, and I think she's going to play a short video. And then there'll be a video presentation by someone called Clive Kelly, who again will be describing their experience, and then by Sasha Byrne. So we're going to have one live Joe with a bit of video, and then 2 more people. And we'll take, again, I'll try and do the same. I'll take a few questions at the end of that session, and then we'll move on to the 3rd charter, and then we'll have the full discussion on that. Okay. So if I can hand over to Joe now, or the organizers will hand over to Joe, so she can do her piece. And I haven't I don't think there's a point giving a biography or anything, Joe. Just explain who you are, and I'm sure that'll be part of your presentation anyway. So over to you, Joe.
I'm a little bit confused because I was asked to make a video, which I did in advance. So I'm hoping that will happen.
Yeah, that will happen.
It will
Yes,
happen.
yeah,
It will happen.
Okay. Do you want me still to introduce myself? I gave
that would be good, and then you can play your video. Yeah,
that's fine. I can wing it. I'm Jo James. I'm a consultant paediatrician. I'd probably like you to watch the video. It says everything I need, but more than happy to any questions afterwards.
Okay, let's do that then. Let's go for the video then. Okay, let's play that.
So the tech team will give the control to Ifat for sharing the video. Ifat, over to you. Are you able to share the video? Are you able to take control, Ifat?
Yeah, I'm just going to load it up, and then I'll share the screen. Is that all right?
Thank you.
Yeah, go on, give it a go. Well, just bear with us, everyone. Yeah.
I'm just going to share my screen and then I'll start it.
We can't hear the audio. Ifat, can you unmute yourself, please? We can't hear the audio. Play it from the beginning, please. Share your screen. We are not able to see the screen. You need to share the sound as well as the screen.
Can you all see the screen now?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Can you see the presentation?
No.
No,
we can't. Okay. All right, I'm going to have to just share the screen again. Bear with me.
Don't worry. I think everyone will stand up, stretch your legs.
Thank you for bearing.
If it's also, yeah, just.
No, yeah, all right.
If it don't forget to tick the share sound, that's the mistake we all make. It's the share sound bit.
All right, I think it's going to work this time. All right, here goes.
Hi, my name's Jo James and I'm a consultant paediatrician. I've been working at a senior level in child and adolescent mental health for 19 years. I'd like to take you back to the end of an ordinary Monday on the 15th of November 2021, just before 5 p.m. An email from the GMC came into my box and it was entitled Notification of Investigation and Referral to IOT. I didn't know what this meant, so I clicked on the attachments and this is what I found. It was a GP complaint about my prescribing, my specialist prescribing. Firstly, that I was prescribing methylphenidate to a 13-year-old boy beyond the dose in the BNF. Secondly, that I was prescribing sertraline and SSRI to a 9-year-old girl. The GP had not discussed any of this with me first. The wife of the GP was the paediatrician who had misdiagnosed both children, and the families had been very angry with that department. Thirdly, the community paediatrician who was now prescribing the methylphenidate was continuing the dose quite happily that I had suggested. This was a malicious complaint. Nevertheless, how does it hit? In all truth, it hits like a grenade. There are words that I read such as, make sure there are no ongoing risks to patients, fitness to practice, and the Fitness to Practice Tribunal is the most draconian of investigations, saved for the most severe cases, the most serious. Why was I one of those? What words were going through my head? Am I considered a potential risk? Am I considered potentially unfit to practice? What could happen? They could take away my license for up to 18 months while they investigate. I'm self-employed. What happens to all those patients who rely on me? What happens to my staff? What happens to me? Why didn't the GMC discuss this with me first? Why didn't they discuss the fact I'm a specialist prescriber? I'd like to take you back 3 weeks before that email came into my inbox. I was on holiday with my daughter. She had a huge epileptic fit and catapulted off a cliff, falling 40 feet onto rock below. She suffered terrible injuries, and she was in hospital for 9.5 months. I climbed down that cliff to try to get to her, but the rescue took 2.5 hours, and by the time the helicopter lifted us off that rock, the waves were crashing over our heads. We were lifted off, and 3 minutes later, the rock was covered by the sea. Both of us nearly died. Both of us nearly drowned. Just 2 days before that email arrived from the GMC, my daughter had developed severe sepsis and had almost gone to intensive care. She was on the high dependency unit for a week. So what did I really feel like that night of the 15th of November 2021? I felt suicidal. And it was the first time I had felt suicidal since 1999, when I had undiagnosed postnatal depression. It all felt too much to bear. So the tribunal came, and it was a purely clinical matter, not misconduct. But of the panel, only one doctor was there. 3 were non-medical, therefore only one person could have had any opinion whatsoever. 10 minutes after the tribunal should have started, it was cancelled because of a conflict of interest and postponed. We therefore used that time to send the information to the GMC that they should have asked for in the first place, and they then cancelled the tribunal and sent my case to an independent expert. By the end of March 2022, that expert had found that there was no case to answer. How did I feel? Did I feel relieved? In all truth, no, I felt angry. No doctor should go through what I had gone through. No doctor should ever go through that again. And so I made a formal complaint, and I sent it 4 times. I sent it via the box on the GMC website. I sent it twice by email, including to the main secretariat, and I sent it by post. And I did not receive a reply from the GMC. The BMA were not interested. They did not even reply to my requests. And then I wrote to my MP, and the MP wrote to the GMC, and I got a letter from the GMC within 2 weeks, which was long and obfuscating and obtuse and evasive, and not answering my questions. The GMC took over 4 months to answer my request for complaint. So what do I think about the GMC? I find them careless. They're rude. The times I had to speak to people on the phone, people were so dismissive and offhand. They're inhumane. They're slow and unresponsive, and they do not practice what they preach. They obstruct and evade. And I found this at the formal face-to-face meeting this last January 2023 in Manchester, when I met up with senior directors. Importantly, they put doctors' lives at risk, including mine. In my opinion, the GMC are not fit for purpose. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay. Thank you, Jo. That was extremely powerful. I think, as I said, I want to move on to the 3 presentations we have. That was the first one. So thank you for that. And so can we go on and play the video from Clive Kelly now, please?
Yes, just give me a sec.
Sure.
Hello, my name is Dr. Clive Kelly, and I'm a physician and consultant rheumatologist at James Cook Hospital in Middlesbrough. My story with the GMC begins as a consequence of one of these young people who'd in fact been known to us as a family friend ever since she'd gone to school with my daughter. In 2015, by which time she was at university, she contacted my family and I to ask for help. And because she had really quite profound mental health issues and some serious consequences relating to these, we agreed to provide that help. 2 years later, in October of 2017, having asked us for continuing support, she applied to join one of my research teams, and I agreed to her doing so on condition that her parents were informed. At this stage, she got very angry with me, and I did contact her parents, and she then told me that she wanted no further contact from me. However, I had taken professional advice in the light of her background and was advised not to break off all contact for fear of precipitating disastrous consequences for her, and I stayed in touch while I was away overseas setting up the research project, both with her and with the other successful applicants. When I got back 5 weeks later, in December of 2017, I found that I'd been the subject of some allegations that I'd harassed her as a consequence of my staying in contact with her while I was in Africa. She actually involved about 12 different organisations, including the GMC, and subsequently over the next few years, the GMC oscillated in terms of their involvement. They couldn't make up their minds as to whether or not to take this further, telling me at first that they wouldn't, and then later on that they would. Eventually, they referred me to the MPTS, alleging I'd harassed my accuser as a result of that contact for 6 weeks while I was away in Africa in 2017. And in 2022, I was finally subjected to an MPTS hearing, prior to which the GMC shared my defence with my accuser. So she knew exactly what I was going to say. She then lied to the GMC and MPTS directly and denied the information that she had provided me with much earlier, which had justified my contact with her. I was then left in a very difficult position, and the MPTS decided that they preferred her evidence to mine and subsequently suspended me for 6 months. We were unable to appeal because my wife, who'd given evidence, went into atrial fibrillation immediately after the hearing, and I too was so shocked that I needed psychiatric help. The consequences were not just bad for us as well, but we have 4 other doctors in our immediate family, and my patients, who of course were not expecting a suspension, were left unsupported, and their condition in several cases deteriorated alarmingly. Since that time, my accuser has continued to make false allegations about me, claiming to the GMC that I have been seen near where she lives when I've been nowhere near that place, that I've written the letters that I simply haven't written, that my research is based on her condition, which is clearly untrue, and a whole load of other really increasingly bizarre allegations. The GMC took 6 months to inform me of this latest set of allegations, only told me in July when they'd received the allegations in January. But they have now finally admitted that they have been weaponized by my accuser, that they have been manipulated by her, and they also admit that they have a duty of care to doctors to protect them from malicious allegations. So they've now been formally requested to review their decision and their decision-making process of last year, in the light of the increasing evidence that's now been submitted to show that the information that my accuser provided to the GMC and to the MPTS was indeed untrue. And that's evident even on the basis of the more recent allegations, where she contradicts some of the things she'd said at the hearing in May of last year. So there are many aspects of this which relate to the GMC's performance, their long decision-making process, their oscillation, the failure to share the information appropriately with all parties, their refusal to accept that an expert witness would have been helpful, the absolute lack of any expertise within the NPTS to deal with mental health issues in women, and indeed the refusal to listen to evidence from a psychiatrist, from the university, and from a judge, all of which would have been highly relevant in proving why I'd had to stay in touch with this woman at her request.
That was, again, very powerful. As I said, we're going to take questions at the end of the session. So can we play the third video now?
At this, and highlighted that this exemplified my concerns as expressed during the hearing itself. The GMC and I had a discussion on the telephone, and they said, well, actually, now that we've looked at this all over again and you sent us the information that we wouldn't look at last year, we can see that you have been a subject of manipulation and that we've been weaponized against you. So they admitted that verbally on the telephone when discussing the second set of allegations.
Right. Okay, well, look, thank you very much, all three of you. I mean, as I said, those are incredibly powerful videos, and I think it's a testament to the sort of work that Viji is doing now, that these will become made public, because I think you know, when you hear personal stories of what's happened, I think they're extremely powerful, and can be really helpful in sort of making the case for what is going wrong at the moment. So I think that's very good. And so thank you, all three of you. As you know, we're going to have questions at the end of this section. So we've got the third one now, which is Omar Karim, who is going to be dealing with the right not to be discriminated. So again, there's two videos here, and we'll just do video one and then followed by video two. I think that's how we agreed we would do it. So over to you, Ifat, again.
I haven't prepared this one. I think Viji's going to load it, I hope.
Okay, Viji.
Yeah, 1 minute. Let me ask my tech team. Priya, can you load Mr. Karim's video?
I cannot.
Yes, 1 second.
Good afternoon. My name is Omar Karim. I'm sorry I cannot present live online, but at the time of this conference, I will be in the air flying back from Cyprus. I'm just going to set up my share screen mode to start the presentation. I am very grateful for the kind invitation to present at this meeting and give this talk under the Doctor's Charter that no doctor should suffer discrimination in the hands of regulatory bodies. My talk, entitled Regulatory Fairness and Overcoming Discriminatory Treatment, a Personal Story, is my own experience of discrimination at the hands of the GMC. Many of you will have heard my talk previously, and I recently gave this talk at BAUS, the British Association of Urological Surgeons. All the facts I present today are in the public domain and have been used in either my FTP hearing or the ET and the EAT hearings against the GMC. Disclosure. I am a Proctor in Robotic Assisted Surgery for Intuitive Surgical. I'm a council member of the BMA and a council member of the Royal College of Surgeons. All the views I express today are my own. This is an overview of my experience and a timeline of events. Initially, it was GMC v Karim, then Karim v GMC, then GMC v Karim, and hopefully we will have Karim v GMC again in the Court of Appeal if we are granted leave to appeal the recent EAT decision. Litigation is a very drawn-out process, and I'm very grateful for the ongoing support of the BMA. The consequences of a GMC referral being weaponized against a doctor are life-changing and catastrophic. The referral had an effect on my entire family, and the devastating repercussions still do. I lost my NHS job. I lost my private practice when I was de-recognized by the insurance companies. We were under huge financial pressure, selling our house and taking our daughter out of private school. I had loss of self-esteem. I felt guilty that I had brought this upon myself. Some colleagues distanced themselves so that they could not be tarred with the same brush. I could only get employment a long way from home, and I ended up living in a travel lodge for 5 years while working away from home to support my family. The psychological stress was pretty immense. I often thought while driving down to Portsmouth, why not crash the car for an easy way out, make it look like an accident, and my family could claim the life insurance. The factors which affected our ability to cope with this ordeal can really be divided into pre-FTP and post-FTP hearing. Before the FTP hearing, I was in survival mode. The survival mode was to support a family. I was unemployed for 5 months. I had to get employment. I am very grateful to the urology department at the Queen Alexandra Hospital in Portsmouth. They were excellent, and I cannot speak more highly of them. I knew that all the allegations against me were non-clinical, with contradictory evidence from my accusers, but the GMC was not prepared to listen to my explanations. Also, very early on in the investigation, I showed evidence to the NPS that the responsible officer of the hospital was lying to the GMC about me. I was told by the NPS in no uncertain terms not to complain about this to the GMC, otherwise the GMC would accuse me of lack of insight and only come back at me even harder. Otherwise, the NPS gave me excellent support from a top-class barrister for the FTP hearing. After the FTP hearing, I was seriously angry about the way I had been treated by the GMC, and I wanted justice. My colleague Hanif Motiwala and I had been following closely even the Calic's progress through the legal system, and we were aware of the change in the law in 2017. The regulator could now be held to account for discrimination. Unusually for a GMC FTP investigation, I had a direct comparative discrimination, my white colleague. I did a subject access request and found that the GMC's own lawyers did not think that their witnesses that they had against me at the FTP hearing were credible. This was pretty shocking. So within 3 months of my FTP hearing, I filed an ET claim against the GMC for discrimination. In June 2021, I won the Employment Tribunal judgment, but the GMC have since had a successful EAT judgment. I have therefore added a minimum of a further 2 years to the legal processes before there might be some sort of closure. In order to understand how we survived the last 9 years of this GMC ordeal, it is helpful to look at my background. I am not an IMG doctor, but I was born in Sudan. What the GMC had not realized was that as a minority doctor, I had experienced discrimination throughout my career. My father taught my brother and I racial tolerance and often reminded us of the signs he saw in windows of boarding houses when he was looking for digs in London in the 1950s. The signs were no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. My mother was Irish, my father was black, so we ticked 2 of the 3 boxes. Both my parents were teachers. We moved from Sudan to West Germany in 1965, where my father got a post as a cultural attaché, looking after students all over Europe. In the 1960s, West Germany was a remarkably tolerant society, and my parents moved in diplomatic circles. The first serious racism we experienced was when in 1968, my mother, my brother and I moved to Macclesfield in the northwest of England. People saw a white woman with 2 coffee-coloured boys. Clearly what people thought was "Here is a broken mixed marriage." To people's surprise, my father joined us a year later. My parents were happily married more than 50 years and were naturally very proud of their son being a doctor. Sadly, my father died, never knowing the outcome of his GMC investigation. I started my schooling at the Kitab in Sudan. I then went to the BFES, or British Families Educational Services School in Cologne. After coming to the UK, I passed 11 plus and went to King's Macclesfield, and I was one of only 2 black children in the school, the other being my brother. I became head boy of the school, which had 1,200 pupils. I did well in my A-levels and was the first person in our family to do medicine, getting a place at Charing Cross. I subsequently did my FRCS and then spent 2.5 years research at Johns Hopkins. When I became a consultant urologist, I was driven. As well as my NHS work, I had commercial ambitions, and in 2000, my colleague Mark Emberton and I floated the company Proscare PLC on AIM. We then did a reverse takeover of MediWatch to become MediWatch PLC. In 2000, I also started a private clinic, Bridge Clinic. I had a large private practice. I was chairman of MediWatch PLC when we did a trade sale to Laborie in 2013. I therefore had significant corporate and legal experience. The GMC had not realized that I was not going to lie down and be abused by them. Basically, the GMC had picked the wrong doctor. That is my background. If you look at my GMC investigation timeline and compare it to the treatment of my direct white comparator, it is easy to see how I might raise a claim of discrimination against the GMC. My comparator, a urologist friend with whom I had worked closely for many years, we were both employed by the same NHS trust. In July 2014, we were both investigated for allegations of conduct and probity and faced an immediate exclusion of 2 weeks. It's important to realize that the initial allegations against us from the trust were identical, and the allegations against us came from the same individuals. We were both referred to the GMC, and we were both subject to IOP hearings by the GMC before the trust had concluded its investigations. These were the initial allegations against us pursued by the GMC. My comparator had 5 allegations, and I had 3 allegations, which were the same. The trust concluded its MHPS investigations, and both reports were sent to the GMC in the same envelope on the 6th of January 2015. It is interesting that it was my colleague Mark's wife, an American lawyer, who first pointed out to me the contrasting conclusions in these 2 reports on evidence which was coming from the same individuals. In my case, the trust added 2 more allegations and excluded me from the hospital again. What was clear was that the trust and the GMC believed the allegations against me, but did not believe the allegations against my white comparator, despite the allegations coming from the same individuals. The GMC case examiner also embellished the allegations against me, so they appeared more serious, and I was immediately referred for a second IOP hearing. The GMC was clearly gunning for me, and at the second IOP, the MPTS passed conditions on my registration. These conditions mirrored the sanctions from the trust, which were that I could only work in urology and that I could not work at Frimley Health NHS Foundation Trust. The effect of these conditions was catastrophic, as I lost my private practice and I had been pursuing an employment tribunal claim against the trust. The MPTS sanctions meant that I had to sign a settlement agreement with the trust. Otherwise, I would face a trust disciplinary, be fired, and I would never work in the NHS again. At The third IOP hearing, I faced a new allegation which I knew was false, and I had documentary evidence to prove that the responsible officer of the trust had lied about me to the GMC. I gave this evidence to the GMC, but nothing was done about the dishonest RO, or responsible officer. Conditions on my registration were removed by the GMC, but the GMC continued to investigate me for another 3 years. In contrast, my comparator had been having meetings with the trust senior management and had agreed to cooperate if the trust dropped the disciplinary process against him. As agreed, the trust wrote to the GMC saying his NHPS investigation was over and the trust was not proceeding with a hearing. The GMC then concluded this investigation of my white comparator. The only difference between my comparator and I was that I was a minority whistleblower and he was white. While I was under GMC investigation, the GMC added new allegations against me on no less than 4 occasions, even after I left the NHS Trust in 2015. After I was cleared at the FTP hearing in 2018, the evidence I got from the subject access request with the GMC allowed me to file a claim for discrimination by the GMC. It was immediately apparent from the evidence that the GMC itself had serious concerns about the validity of the allegations against me, yet the GMC pursued the investigations with vigor right up to the FTP hearing. Apart from non-disclosure of evidence by the GMC, there was concern about the credibility of the GMC witnesses. After the GMC completes an investigation of a doctor, it passes all the evidence to its in-house legal team who write a summary RPT or realistic prospect test. In my case, the realistic prospect test by the GMC's own lawyers had serious concerns about the credibility of their own witnesses against me. In the case of one witness, they used his allegation against me, but they did not actually interview him as they felt that he was not a credible witness. It really beggars belief that this is the conduct of our regulator. Someone at the GMC had decided that I was a guilty black doctor, guilty of misconduct, and they were going to make the evidence fit the allegations against me. As you will be aware, 3 months ago, the GMC successfully appealed the judgment of the Employment Tribunal ruling on technicalities, and we may have to go back to the Employment Tribunal for a new hearing. I believe that the GMC's barrister was economical with the truth and effectively rewrote the narrative of the ET judgment in his submission to the ET Employment Appeal Tribunal in order to achieve this successful appeal. What next? I am very fortunate that the BMA are continuing to support me, and I would seriously encourage all doctors to join the BMA as we need a strong union. We have made a submission to the Court of Appeal and hopefully we will be granted leave to appeal. Doctors have lost confidence in their regulator, which we pay for. We need to make changes to the regulatory system for a fairer and less draconian regulation. To be honest, I wouldn't trust the GMC at the present time as far as I could throw them. We all need to fight racism in the NHS. Perhaps as an individual, you know you will never overcome these catastrophic life-changing events. Most importantly, however, my family and friends have been very supportive during this ordeal. I'm very fortunate to have a close, caring family. Recently, David Selu has become a good friend. Thank you. I'll just stop sharing the screen. Thank you. Good
Okay.
afternoon. My name's...
Yeah, good. No, carry on, yeah. Vijay, I think there's a second video, a very short video that comes after this, yeah. So if you could just load that second video, then yeah.
Yeah, we are doing it in the background.
Okay.
I've been thinking about my case and how we can try and improve things. I'm just going to share my screen. We have a dysfunctional regulatory system. How can we make the system fairer for all doctors? I believe that there are two things that need to be addressed. Firstly, we need to review the whole process of the MHPS investigation. There needs to be transparency and accountability of NHS managers who instigate these investigations against doctors. We need a level playing field with equity of arms. Trusts can spend hundreds of thousands of pounds pursuing doctors and whistleblowers for false allegations or fabricated allegations, yet a doctor's resources can be very limited to try to defend their position. We also need truly independent investigators who manage these MHPS processes. I heard a lady called Julia Hollywood, who was really quite dishonest in her mode of investigation. She is effectively a hired gun, as described by David Drew in his book NHS Whistleblowers. Julia Hollywood in chapter 36, he described her as a hired gun, and she was a hatchet person, basically hired to write a false report in favor of a trust against a doctor. What do we need to do about the GMC? Well, the GMC has got various things that it needs to address, in particular discrimination, but I believe that the GMC's ELA, or Employment Liaison Advisor, needs to be scrapped, as this is a very unhealthy relationship between NHS senior management and the GMC, which allows a GMC referral by the back door to be weaponized against whistleblowers. We need independent scrutiny of GMC processes, and there should be proper accountability of complainants and the GMC. GMC legal needs to be scrapped, and GMC's legal advice should be outsourced. I believe that an external law firm might be more critical of evidence against a doctor, as the law firm would have their own reputation to defend rather than pursue a doctor. Most importantly, as agreed by BMA Council and ARM, there should be anonymity of registrants in the FTP process. A doctor should also be innocent until proven guilty. Perhaps most importantly, we need to raise the burden of proof from the civil standard of greater than 51% to the criminal standard of beyond reasonable doubt, as any GMC investigation or allegations can have life-changing consequences to a doctor and their family. I'm just going to stop sharing now. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you for those videos. As you all know, David is not is on a plane, so he won't be joining us. But before we proceed to the sort of Q&A on this section, Viji Suresh, who's the organizers conference, who I introduced at the very beginning, is going to say a few words now about the Voice of Doctors. So I'll hand over to Viji, and then we'll come to the questions. Okay. So Viji, off you go.
Thank you, Anis. Hope Priya can share the, thank you. So, afternoon, everyone. I'm Viji Suresh, wife of late Dr. Sridhar and Suresh. I welcome you all. Thanks very much for attending the conference. I'm not a medical doctor, but the reason I'm campaigning is for the improvement in how the doctors are treated is mainly because of the loss of my husband. My husband was an anesthetic consultant, and he had a misfortune of having a hallucinating patient allege that he had touched her inappropriately. This triggered a barrage of investigations against him and restrictions over his personal and professional life. Initially, it was the police. Then he was excluded by the NHS employer. And as the accuser was an adolescent, we also had an adolescent child in our family, and the social services got involved. While this was happening, Chinese whispers began to swirl in the workplace. My husband was left professionally and personally isolated, and as a family, we were shattered. A month later, the GMC got involved, and soon as that happened, my husband took his own life. For those who do not already know the details, I invite you to visit the website and view Dr. Ifat Atullah's amazing documentary called Multiple Jeopardy. And thank you, Ifat, for the great effort to bring the story to the limelight. In the last 29 days that my husband lived after learning the allegation, we felt that everything had turned against him. 3 or 4 powerful organizations were pointing their fingers at him, while all of them were powerful and had the ability to investigate him and place various restrictions. None of them were concerned about his well-being. No one felt that they owed a duty of care. So my husband was felt cornered and with no one to stand up for him. The final straw in my husband's painful journey was the GMC's insensitive intervention. And that proved to be a hammer blow. And soon after, he took his life. So why is the GMC's intervention so very insensitive? The GMC knew that my husband was facing an allegation of sexual nature from an adolescent. He was being investigated by the police. The child was given the drugs, anesthetic drugs called midazolam and fentanyl. And they also know that he was suspended by his employers. So the GMC would know that the doctor in this situation would fear for their professional survival, for their livelihood, and they would be under severe stress. They are the doctor's governing body. Who else will know better than GMC? They would also know that a doctor excluded from the employer, the NHS trust, would also be forbidden to do any other work, and they therefore do not pose any risk to the patients. And still, they intervened. They choose not to speak to the employer's responsible officer, despite knowing that the employer was involved and had suspended my husband. They choose not to inquire the police how their investigation has progressed, and they just intervened. The GMC are too good to instill fear in the doctors. Let me tell you how and why based on my personal experience. So the GMC takes the allegation in its face value. In my husband's case, the police referral was taken on the face value. GMC investigations generally last for months, if not for years. You have heard about Sasha's, Clive, and everyone's case here. While investigation is taking place, the GMC may take interim action on the assumption that the allegation is true and may suspend the doctor's registration while it investigates the allegation, and this may last many, many months and years. Even if the doctor is eventually cleared, they may have suffered huge reputational loss and may even have lost their career during this period, and all because of a serious allegation which was made, which is not proven. The doctors are treated guilty before proving their innocence. These are last few things my husband spoke to me in our final conversations. And on May the 2nd, 2018, the GMC sent my husband a long letter summoning him to appear before the Interim Orders Tribunal with the statement from the complainant about the allegation, few lines which are not inappropriate to read here. They also asked him to provide the details of all the places where he worked and They wanted to share those 4 sentences to all the employers and wherever he has worked and is working. So the reputational damage which he was dreading had become a reality when he was alone, when he was tired, when he was in excruciating pain. He was torn into pieces in that 1 hour. Soon after receiving the GMC letter, my husband had sent an anxious text message to a friend that the GMC is circulating the messages to everyone. And within that short period, we had lost his precious life. The loss has crushed us as a family. All the organizations were lobbying grenades at my husband while he was alive. There was no one to put in place a strategy to defend him. There was no legal input, no professional input, except an emotional support from one friend. What can a friend do in this circumstances? How can a friend help in this scenario? This is a scenario where professional expertise is needed to find and devise a strategy to get out of the swamp. The despair that I was experiencing after my husband's loss was the same despair that my husband was suffering while he in his last 28 days of his life. Over the period of time, I discovered that my family story and my husband's loss was not isolated. Many other doctors have committed harm, killed themselves while facing the GMC allegations or GMC's investigations. Scores of others, while they haven't lost their life, have suffered immeasurably and lost their well-being. No one heard my husband's voice when he was alive. No one heard the voice of others who have died. No one hears the voice of those who have suffered, but still they are alive. They vanish, and no one pays attention to them. We formed a community called Voice of Doctors in 2022. We are slowly gathering momentum and determined to campaign for the rights of doctors and to give doctors a voice. The mission is to impart knowledge on the doctors. Personally, I and my husband had no understanding to defend the situation we found ourselves in. We were helpless. After my husband has passed away, every day is a learning curve for me to educate, understand, assess, and this reminds me of my husband's innocence and his helplessness. Now I'm fighting with the GMC. It's nearly 5.5 years, and the preliminary case hearing is scheduled in the High Court in coming November. That's next month. I wish my husband and myself had known about the GMC when he was alive. I want the doctors' rights to be honored. GMC, MHPS, or any other organization can conduct investigation. However, few ground rules need to be present before, while, or after conducting an investigation. How do we make doctors better protected? We can't expect GMC or any other organizations to reform itself. The regulatory bodies are never going to change. How do we create awareness, training, and learning? Voice of Doctors is a campaign that is intended to develop these thoughts. People have many ideas around us. This will be distilled and is likely to become a knowledge base in itself. We have created a simple charter of rights for doctors, where Dr. Chowdhury, Rajendra Chowdhury, had played a big, vital role in it. So the Doctors' Charter was explained by many speakers earlier. By Mr. Phil Banfield has summarized the right to life, where doctors' well-being is of paramount importance, and where Joe, Clive, Sasha have demonstrated how an inappropriate allegation has shattered their lives and livelihood. Mr. Omar Karim's journey to fight the discrimination and the employment tribunal outcome has become the new history in the era of GMC. Let's now consider the current system in its own right. The investigations are not unbiased. Every regulator seeks out evidence which would support the allegation made against the doctor. It does not seek out evidence that would undermine or disprove the allegation. Organizations such as GMC or employer or police have the statutory powers to seek out evidence. And because there is no such power to the doctor, the imbalance makes the investigation biased against the doctor. Thereafter, when the GMC and the MPTS determine whether an allegation is true, even an allegation that may destroy a doctor's professional career or result in their erasure from the medical register. The truth of the allegation is determined by the prevalence of probability, where there is just a doctor's word against that of the accuser, and there is no evidence which one is true. The GMC and the tribunal often believe the accuser. The race of the doctor may add into their bias. Multiple doctors are being erased and suspended based on no evidence other than the word of the accuser. I'm not a medical doctor by myself, and I was bewildered by the way the GMC's letter had such a devastating effect on my husband. I do now understand the reasons why a GMC letter kills a doctor. It's sad to say that I can't convince my husband's mother, even today, how a letter killed her loving son. The anger on his final decision prevails, but the pain behind the decision is very, very hard to understand. This is something only doctors can understand. This is something only a doctor can support his or her colleague while in a professional distress. The current frightening powers of the governing bodies and the way they are used insensitively and punitively by conducting distressingly long investigations and seeking to punish doctors to the worst extent, and their complete disregard for the reputation of the doctor is not acceptable. In this category, GMC tops the list by instilling fear, threatening the fear, and my husband had built a professional reputation for over many years, but the GMC's involvement meant that he would be tainted forever. He is a sensitive person, even though we could have protected him very easily, but it is the timing of that final intervention, which if I had a time machine, I would turn it back. The cost of every life lost is very, very precious. In 2022, in a similar way, we would have read about Mr. McPhillips' decision after seeing a letter. What happened to my husband is likely to happen to anyone. The allegation that was made against him could be made against anyone. If a similar thing happens, the chain of events would be the same. Once an allegation such as that my husband faced is made, the police will turn up, the employer would exclude the doctor, and someone else would refer them to the GMC, and the GMC would behave the same. So no one is ever held accountable and responsible for these acts. Even after 5.5 years of this allegation, I cannot get the actual complaint from the police. Everything is misinterpreted from the bottom of the supply chain here. And the legal battle is massive. And this is where I'm legally asking the GMC to let them say whether do you have a duty of care for doctors. This is the legal case that we are fighting for. And I'm thankful to the BMA for supporting this legal case, which is going to take a precedence. And this outcome of this is going to set a precedence for all the doctors. And I think this is the only tribute that this is one of the tributes I can give it to my husband. The system is being accused against the doctors. For example, in Lucy Ledby's case, the doctors were threatened to back off in the name of a GMC referral. The doctors were forced to apologize to Lucy Ledby in the name of a GMC referral. What happened to my husband is a system failure. People who have suffered and are suffering need to be heard. Only then the organizations such as GMC, MHPS, police, social services, and many more are likely to change. Ultimately, we need a very strong social network that will provide an appropriate safe space for the doctors. In memory of my husband, I have set up a charity called Protecting Medics from Tragedies and a campaign called Voice of the Doctors. It is a very slow process, but we have reached this far in this last 5 years. The Voice of Doctors is intended to give a voice to the doctors, those who are silenced. And it will document the suffering encountered by the doctors in terms of blog posts, in terms of podcasts, or in terms of YouTube videos, or in terms of providing some space for them to discuss. It's not easy to run such a community to address such a huge cause. Voice of Doctors is not for publicity. It is born out of an excruciating pain. Every day, people join from different walks of lives to bring in change in the Voice of Doctors. In 2022, we started a survey of the existing investigation systems and introduced the concept of Doctors Charter. The survey outcome from the Doctors Charter and the investigation process is absolutely thought-provoking. We are working on areas of collaboration to analyze the Doctors Charter survey results and publication aspects of it as well. For example, few organizations such as National Audit Office are under consideration by our team members. So we need to make Doctors Charter an actual existing standard. For example, evidence by law or national policy document. Another strand of activity within the Voice of Doctors is to provide a digital platform to support the doctors in professional distress. For example, the stories of the doctors who underwent professional distress are being published and will be regularly done from now on. Anyone from the community can point to colleagues to share their stories in the Voice of Doctors platform. We may face legal challenges while publishing these contents in a public forum. Hence, there will be a core committee who will be carefully vetting the details before the publication. For example, if it's documentary for multiple jeopardy about my husband's journey, the police had a very strong objection to release it. And IFAD had to fight vehemently using her lawyers to say that this need to be published and there is nothing wrong in there and we won't be editing anything. So that's such a controversial area where the police guilt is being shown in the documentary. And I need to thank IFAD for fighting for that to bring it into this public space. The next area is that, so even this Voice of Doctor, this portal is going to have a big challenge to release all your stories, but we will do our best to fight. And we need volunteers, powerful lawyers and barristers to help us to come and publish all these in the limelight, to bring these things in the limelight. The next area is that we are starting a calendar of events to disseminate the stories from our database to many painful suffering, to show the painful suffering of many individuals. It is likely to be a series of interviews maintaining anonymity or live 30 minutes discussions. So the important aspect of the Voice of Doctors will be campaigning for the right cause and for the distressed doctor. Our first campaign will be launched in terms of the digital petition demanding the need for the Doctors' Charter of Rights. So the URL for the petition is now, you will be seeing it in the screen and can be found in the chat as well, for all of you to own this and promote this. This is not belonging to me or anybody else. It's not a personal thing, this doctor's charter, unless otherwise all of you start speaking and asking about the doctor's charter. This is not likely to happen. To summarize, the voice of doctor is an approach to creating a system to cater for doctor's voice and to address the historical imbalance in the system, and also to address the injustice, including the human rights violation of the doctors. It's easy to make an allegation. It's extremely easy to start an investigation. It's extraordinarily straightforward to point fingers. However, who is suffering from this system? It's time to think. Without you all, there is no voice of doctors. Together we stand and bring the change. I'm just one of the supporters for the doctors' well-being and campaigner for the doctors' charter. The journey is absolutely in your hands. And thanks again for listening.
Thank you, VG. I think if there was an audience here, we could clap and hear everyone, because I think, again, I think all of you have made some very powerful presentations and videos. And when I was explained about the doctor's voice, I think it's going to be a very powerful resource, hopefully, in this campaign for change. So what we're going to do next is, the first thing is, just before you go, I'm going to give you a 5-minute break. Just go stretch your legs, take a break, and it'll give also the IT team time to get organized for the next session, because we're going to have a panel consisting of myself chairing, Raj Chowdhury, Samantha, Ifat, Phil, and Chan Nagpal. And then they will say a few words. Really, it's not about them, but it's about them having a discussion, which we can start then. So it's just 1 minute past 4. So can we come back in 5 minutes? And then we can start the next stage. So thank you so far, and let's just take a break and then come back again. Yeah. 10 minutes, okay? They've just asked, the IT team have asked for 10 minutes. So I've just got it there. So you got 10 minutes, which is great. So come back at 10 past, well, should we say 10 past 4, okay? Thank you, bye. You can leave your videos on, by the way, and you can just leave your computers on. Saves you logging in again.
Anis?
Yeah, I'm here. Mm-hmm.
Is it okay to just so how shall I disseminate that list? I put it on the WhatsApp, but Phil won't get it, and Chand. I just want everyone who's on the panel to make sure they get that. How shall I? Shall I post it to each person on?
If you could, yeah, I've got it now. I've just seen the questions. Yeah.
Hi, Chand. Did you want to send me something?
Yeah, I'll send it in the chat directly to you. Is that all right, Chand?
Okay,
and
that's
Phil?
perfect. And you can hear me all right, can you?
Yeah, we can hear you great. Yeah, yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah. So.
Peter is speaking. Peter is not.
Okay, let's people are sort of coming back and it's 4:10. It'd be nice if we can finish about 4:45. So let's try and keep this session moving quite quickly. Now, I've never had to organize such a large meeting all online, really, and I'm not sure how we're going to do this or if it's going to work or not, but let's have a go. We're going to have a panel, and I think the camera is going to be turned on to those people. That's Raj, Samantha Harding, Ifat, Phil Banfield, and Chand Nagpal. So I think if the cameras can sort of put those people prominent, so we can see them, or the audience can see them. I was told that that could happen. Yeah. Now the reason for that panel is really because I suppose there is some expertise in those people. Raj Chowdhury has been a great supporter for VG, and is extremely experienced. He's a doctor himself, and has had to face problems in the NHS, and he's become a huge expert on GMC, and they're working on racism. Samantha Harding, I was given information on, but I can't find it at the moment, so she'll introduce herself. Hi, Samantha. And then
do you want me to do that now?
Yeah, you do that now.
Yeah, sure. So,
yeah.
So I'm Samantha Harding. A lot of people know me as Samantha Gordon. I was a journalist and then became a mature entrant to medicine. During my time as a medic, I met every possible obstruction at every stage of my career. And I now spend my time hopefully campaigning to stop other doctors going through what I went through. And most people will know me for the 19-week vigil me and Evelyn Mensah did outside the General Medical Council for Valentine Adoye, which saw him exonerated from a very silly complaint of ticking the wrong box on a form.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm here to share that expertise.
Okay, Samantha. So that's great. Then, of course, Ifat, who's been helping organize the conference, and yours, some of you hopefully will see her video that she made. She is also a doctor. Then Phil Banfield, and then Chad Nagpal, who was the previous chair of the BMA Council. So what we're going to do is that I've sort of tried to group a couple of questions together, if you still think that you've got to add things, keep posting them on the chat, and then maybe we can put one forward. But so I don't know how this is going to work, but let's try. And amongst the panel, I think that I mean, it's going to be very difficult to try and say who speaks how, but we'll just see how it goes. Okay, it might become obvious. The first question, it's probably directed both you at Chand and at Phil. There's quite a few questions about the role of the BMA. Like Jo Jones, for example, explained that, she wrote to the BMA and no one responded even. Others on the chat have talked about how they found the BMA itself is quite difficult. And, it is a trade union for doctors, I suppose. I mean, you may not want to use that word to describe it, but there is a concern about how it doesn't always, address complaints made by individuals or seeking help or whatever else. I mean, would either of you want to say something about that? Perhaps both of you might. So, I mean, I know the BMA also is supporting, like VG, is supporting Omer and others, so it's not saying that it's bad, but do you think there's a problem there that can be addressed? So let me go to you first, Chan, because you haven't spoken yet, and then I'll ask Phil. So go on, Chan, could you deal with that? Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so the first thing is, if you can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're hearing you good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So the first thing to say is that with the examples of Vigi and Omer, both cases that were taken on by the BMA when I was BMA Council Chair, you can see how beneficial it can be and how important it can be to have the backing of your trade union. So you've got two good examples, but you've also seen in your chat, and I've heard repeatedly from others that the BMA hasn't been there at their darkest hour of need. And so I'm going to be accountable for myself. I'm not going to speak for Phil, so I'll be accountable for myself. So one of the first things when about a year into becoming BMA Council Chair, I commissioned a review about the services. So I got my council to support it because I felt that the BMA was not supporting its members in a way that it should, because my inbox was flooded from the day I became Council Chair from disgruntled, unhappy doctors who had suffered poorly or hadn't received the support they should have received. So I'm being open. This is nothing new. I was clear that the BMA was not delivering as it should. And as a trade union, what do people pay that £500 for? They pay it like an insurance policy at a time of need, that you can have your trade union watching your back. So that review did take place, and it really, in fact, came up with some very good recommendations, and it interviewed a range of doctors who had felt unfairly treated, which was my aim, that you learn. You have to have a learning culture in the NHS. You have to have a learning culture in the BMA. Thereafter, I then also felt very worried or unhappy about the issues around race discrimination in the NHS. And I got even a larger number. In fact, I'd say probably 9 out of 10 doctors who contacted me were all of an ethnic minority. And I went back to my council and said that the BMA now needs to have an independent review of its services to ethnic minority doctors. That review actually only took shape after I concluded my term, so I can't comment on that review. But all I'm saying is there is an issue. And the way you solve an issue is by being open that it needs to be tackled, it needs to be addressed, and just about the role of the BMA in issues of the GMC. Remember, many doctors suffer dual jeopardy. They have a massive MHPS and disciplinary hearings or disciplinary processes within their organization, their trust, whilst concomitantly being referred to the GMC, often in a weaponized manner, so that the issue for them is highly acute. And then there's a third issue, which is that when the GMC takes action, or when a person may be suspended, the BMA has a role to support that member in terms of their employment. And this interface between the role of a trade union and where a defense body comes in is an interface which I believe hasn't been dealt with as well as it should, and needs to be, because often a member will feel abandoned when the problem becomes a GMC issue, and they feel their trade union suddenly, washes its hands off. That should not be happening. So my open and honest answer, and I would have said this whilst I was BMA Council Chair, did say it, we do need to do much better, and we need to look at this openly and honestly and see tangible change in the way trade unions support their members.
Phil, can I come to you next then? Just do you want to make a comment, because obviously you chair of council now. Yeah.
No. I mean, it's what is really important is that we don't try to change the narrative. Chand set off a number of inquiries and surveys, and probably they can all be summarised as we can be quite rubbish at times, and the toughest thing that both Chand and I have had is to get the BMA to acknowledge that that's the case. It is really difficult to work out exactly what our role is, because if I hear people's commonest complaint is the BMA was not with me in the workplace. It was not at the point at which I needed help because I was being bullied or people were starting to make allegations against me. I didn't have anyone there with me. That's not the legal process. That's not employment advice. That's your union being your friend or your supporter. And, if you are from a particular background, you are less likely to have friends and supporters, perhaps in places that can help you in a material way. Now, that's completely different to the way that the BMA has been set up, which is, if you ring up the BMA, you are ringing a call centre that doesn't understand who you are and where you are, but it does give you employment advice. So it makes it black and white by, do you fit the answer that we've got about your employment? And it may be that employment advice is technically correct, but it doesn't help you. It doesn't make you feel better about, if you've articulated one particular concern and my employment advice is, yeah, but that's here is the advice about that concern. I haven't got currently a mechanism for saying, but what are the other bits that are going on? Because that doesn't seem right to us. And the point that Chand and I are both making is, when we get sight of the other bits that are going on, it's quite easy as a clinician and as a doctor to think that doesn't sound right to me either. Right? So there's that bit of getting the BMA into that workplace, and we're restructuring the BMA because we are not meeting that need. That is completely different to the point at which it becomes legal, and it's about what can be proved and disproved, because once lawyers become involved, the chances of success nosedive, and the money becomes just eye-watering. And we've got to make sure that we, at that point, use the right money at the right place. But it then sets people up for disappointment, because if the case is not very straightforward, it gets really difficult to get to the heart of exactly what's going on. And that's what Chand was really good at, was to picking out the other bits that are relevant. And we're trying to move the BMA into that space by moving towards a system where people's cases are not just looked at from an employment point of view, but looked at by medics in the same way that the MDOs have doctors looking at those cases, so that they are understood, and they're understood by people who are similar to you.
Okay, thank you. So I know this is not about the BMA, but I thought it'd be useful for both of you to answer. So the next group of questions were around the problem of vexatious complaints, and the cases we heard, including Dr. Suresh's case. They all seem to have this very common theme of vexatious complaints, and I'll come to you first, Sam. In terms of what do you think should happen about vexation complaint? I mean, it's very difficult, I suppose. You know, I don't know. I sometimes feel responsible because I was really engaged myself in this when I was part of the Shipman Inquiry, and we were looking at how bad the GMC was in terms of protecting patients, and then perhaps the pendulum has swung way too far against doctors, you know, and in some senses that is not the outcome we wanted. We were trying to right one balance, and we've ended up in a much worse situation. But you know, it's not easy initially to understand that it's a vexatious complaint. I mean, I think in Suresh's case it clearly was, because there are other people in the room, and there's lots of, you'll see this on the video, you know, that it's just the case. But is there a way, Sam, that you think that vexatious complaints, you know, can be dealt with? But what do you feel about that?
So, in my humble opinion, it's being done in a slightly back to front way at the moment. So, for example, in Dr. Odoye's case, the chap we defended for 19 weeks outside the GMC, it was pretty obvious that he had filled in a form innocently with no underhand intent or umbrage or any other emotional state that was ascribed to him. And in all honesty, it took 5 years before we drew attention to the fact that the decision making in that case, which could all have been sorted without even leaving his department, it was a form where he ticked the wrong box, and somebody should have just said, Dr. Odoye, let's sit down and go through this form and sort this out. And can you believe that didn't happen? That then led to an immediate, almost immediate GMC referral, and poor Dr. Odoye was then slung into 5 years of hell, which actually resulted in his first MPTS hearing when he was rushed to resus at Manchester Royal Infirmary with cardiac pain. So of course, what should have happened in the very beginning is he should have been sat down, the form looked at, rectified, and allowed to go on his way. Similarly, in other cases I've been involved in, it's back to front. The expert witness is the last person called upon to give their opinion of what's happening, but they should actually be the first to come and look at the case, triage it, and say, this is ridiculous. How has it even got to this point? And there was a point at which Charlie Massey was talking about fast-track cases. I attended the House of Commons debate after the gross negligence manslaughter report by Norman Williams that was looking at the treatment of Hadiza Baba Garba when she was pursued with the use of her own reflections against her, which is extraordinary in itself, that you innocently make notes of how you felt about something, and then that comes up as indicative of your guilt. But this whole idea of fast tracking a thing, we're now back to square one. There was an idea that we could speed up these cases, get them looked at quickly, get them out of the way, and it just isn't happening. The GMC probably needs to be dismantled, put back together from the bottom up, and there needs to be fundamental reform with information on the protected characteristics and how to handle them from start to finish. And the disproportionate referral of Black and ethnic minority doctors is an absolute outrageous disgrace and has to stop. And you will see me, if there's anyone from the GMC listening to this now, you will see me outside Euston Road again. If this keeps on happening, I will be holding my vigil with my candle and my posters if you keep on doing this until you change. So that's
okay,
my
Raj,
view.
can I bring you in on that? What's your view on this? Because I know you are very experienced in dealing with all matters GMC.
Yes, I mean, GMC, as they admitted in Clive's case, they are open to being weaponized, and they can be any kind of referral can be made so long as it appears serious on its face. They will run with it. In Dr. Suresh's case, I mean, like Viji said in her talk, the referral in Dr. Suresh's case seemed very serious, but if they had just taken the trouble of looking a little bit more deeply in it, they would have realized that there is nothing in it. The patient was hallucinating, and that's how she made a complaint. So that's the level to which the GMC are prone to be sort of weaponized. Any kind of complaint becomes a serious complaint. And if someone does it maliciously and cleverly, then you've had it. So I've had people go to the GMC so-called whistleblowing. So if they claim that they are whistleblowers, the GMC is obliged not to disclose their name. So who is complaining, you won't know. But I had one doctor who was in a GP practice, and her senior GP partner was basically, he was kind of in his 70s, and he was losing it. Basically, he was prescribing things which he should not have been prescribing. So she was trying to point that out, and he referred her to the GMC on the grounds that she is doing something wrong, and the GMC started an investigation against her. So we realized that this is what was happening, and the so-called whistleblower must be her senior partner. And we asked the GMC, is this the person who has made the complaint? And the GMC said yes. And at that point, the complaint stopped. So it is completely open to being weaponized. It's just so difficult to really get GMC to take things seriously. It's very, very difficult. And, such things cause such grievous damage as is apparent from Viji's case.
Yeah. Okay. So and that's tied up with one of the questions about GMC as a weapon, and we can see this. And I think that one of the issues is the lack of local investigation, and it's very, very interesting. I mean, I was just looking up, because you're all talking about these MHSP investigations, and it's quite fascinating how these things have developed, because of course prior to and there's a bit of history here, and sorry to go on about this, but when I first began to investigate issues about doctors in trouble, trusts would go around just suspending doctors. It was called gardening leave, and they were put on gardening leave, and sometimes they were put on leave for years. And there were very many famous cases. Wendy Savage was one of them, for example, that was put on gardening leave. And I remember very clearly, because when Liam Donaldson was appointed as the CMO in about 1997 with the new Labour administration, he persuaded them to set up the National Clinical Assessment Authority. And it was precisely because of his experience as a regional medical officer at the Department of Health that he found when he came in, and I remember I'd been writing about this, that I think at the time there were maybe over 100 consultants who were on so-called gardening leave, make investigations. And he worked, and I remember talking to him about this, and he worked with a senior Department of Health official, and they went and investigated all these cases because it was costing the department a huge amount. They were all on full pay while they're on gardening leave. And they were able to close, I think, virtually all the cases because they were just a nonsense, really. And that's what prompted this development of what I think the idea was originally, to create a super investigation branch, build the expertise of looking at these very, very complex cases. And it's interesting that Letby case has brought this up very, very clearly. Sometimes these are very complex issues. And the Royal Statistical Society wrote a submission to the Letby inquiry. And of all places, I was reading in Private Eye as well, Phil Hammond, who writes in it. And I've argued, and I remember talking to Janet Smith about the Shipman inquiry, that what the NHS lacks is an independent investigation unit which understands what goes wrong. So in the case of Dr. Suresh, would have known straight away that this is hallucination. In the case of Dr. Doyo's case, would have known this is simply just a ticking box form, you know, and can resolve that. And whether the NCA could ever have done that, I don't know. But I know it was building up a huge expertise. But of course, when the coalition government came in, it was one of the first things to axe. And now we've got this incredible. I mean, how can you set up an organization called Maintaining Health Standards or Profession, whatever? I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? It just you wouldn't. It's Kafkaesque, isn't it? Almost, you know. What does that mean? I had to look it up. I mean, what on earth are they talking about, this MHSP investigation? And you want someone to assess clinically what is going wrong and deal with it, really. So yes, I mean, that's just a bit of history in there. But I think that Raj dealt with this business of vexation complaints and how the GMC is used, and the lack of local, local investigation. And if it's done poorly, you know. And these are complex cases. It can't be resolved easily. But unless you have expertise to do it, then it won't be done. So I don't know what you feel about that. Do you think that, can I ask the panel, sorry, taking over from the audience a bit, but do you think there's any case for this, like having an expert investigation body that can look at things and at least give advice to trusts about what should and shouldn't happen? Do you think there'd be value in that? Ifat, you haven't said anything. Do you think you've got some experience as well, but you've made videos and so on? What do you think about that?
I think yes and no, because I think it really goes fundamentally to what Samantha was pointing to, which is that unless whoever raises a concern and whoever is looking at it, the first person looking at it, unless they approach it with what's called professional curiosity, whoever they may be, whether they be, the medical director, or whether they be the receptionist who picks up the phone inquiry at the BMA employment area, unless they apply professional curiosity and apply a level of what do I really know to be able to answer this query, and who really needs to address this problem, nothing will change. It doesn't matter whether you have, but for specialist things like Joe's case or Dr. Suresh's case, or actually anybody's case, of course, there should be a complete directive that their specialist advice from colleges or a specialist in that area, if it's a clinical matter, be sought immediately. But since the large body of complaints are around conduct, a totally grey area, unless some professional curiosity is applied to whatever is raised, nothing will change at first point.
Yeah, okay, fair point. Chand, would you like to comment? Yeah.
Okay, if I understand the question correctly, I mean, I think that there needs to be proper external scrutiny at the point in which, if you look in a hospital trust, complaints are developed, because there is huge bias in the system, even in the way an organization, the medical director, the trust board can case build, and the person being complained about is completely unaware of what's being put together. And then when that's sent to the GMC, they will look at that and then say, gosh, there's a case to answer. But in fact, at that first step, there's been, the whole system is biased or can be biased. We live in a world where people are scapegoated rather than focusing on the actions of trust. That happens a lot. So I believe strongly that there should be, and I know Arun Baxi is here on the call, I believe there should be an external scrutiny panel at that point. And I believe that, and those scrutiny panels need to be separate, independent of the employing trust. Because if they actually did that, and the person being complained about should have an equal right to see exactly what the case building against them is and have the ability to contribute to that external scrutiny panel. So what you have at the moment is the person being complained about is in the dark, a whole case is filed against them, and then the next thing they know, they're up against the GMC who says, how awful. But that's not even a fair presentation of the situation. Should never have got that far. So that's what I would put in place.
Yeah. Raj, you wanted to add something
Yes.
on professional defense as well. Yeah.
Can I first touch on this present one, which is whether there should be an independent investigatory body? So you referred to, Anis, you referred to the old system and how it changed with Liam Donaldson's at his insistence. Previously, the system was called EL89 9 or something. That was the predecessor of MHPS. And under that regime, the investigation used to be very thorough. There used to be an external investigator properly accredited, and they would conduct a good investigation. So usually the investigation results used to be quite good. But the problem in that regime was that the trust could put people on gardening leave for long periods of time. So the NHS was losing a lot of money because people were being put on the gardening leave. But the investigation was more robust, and doctors had better right, and they could challenge things more thoroughly in the old system. NHS stopped losing money by not putting people in gardening leave, but then they switched to this MHPS, which allows trusts to appoint investigators who are basically cowboys. They are hired guns, they are actually paid to produce results or reports, which actually gets the doctor into trouble. And there is probably an incentive for them, because if they produce good results where doctors are acquitted, they will probably not be rehired. And because they are paid privately, they will keep doing the trust's bidding. So this is a big problem with MHPS investigations. Now, in terms of the other point that I wanted to come to myself, when you put the question to Phil and to Chan, in the point about medical defense at the moment, as both of them have acknowledged, there are problems with what the BMA provides, and it's not very different to what any other trade union would provide in this situation. What you need is a uniform defense organization that covers both employment as well as the GMC, and there should be no gaps in between. Unfortunately, we have a big problem, which is that the BMA covers the employment issues. It doesn't have expertise of clinical nature, and they give employment advice, but they are not necessarily focused on medical profession. So they give generic medical employment advice, which is not what doctors require. They require very targeted advice, which is also bearing in mind how the case is going to progress in the GMC. So this is a major flaw in the system. This is not BMA's fault. This is not the defense union's fault. It's the way it has been structured historically that this major flaw exists at the moment. I have been running a defense union, a small defense union. Not many people have heard about it. It's called Doctors and Dentists Protection Union. And I have been following this regime where the doctor receives employment advice from a medically and employment advice trained professionals. Same person has both expertise, and the same person takes the case from start to finish, even if it goes to the GMC. So there is no gap. The second thing that the defense unions and the BMA have to do together is to go after these the regulatory organizations, such as the GMC, such as the trusts, which are putting doctors in difficulty. So it should not be just defense, defense, defense. You have to go on the offensive. So as I heard in Joe's case, there was a malicious report to the GMC. Well, GMC should be taken to task for not taking action against that person. GMC should not be allowed to just leave. You have to go after these organizations if you expect the reform to happen. You cannot just say that, okay, now this doctor is has escaped the clutches of the GMC or clutches of the trust. We managed to defend them and get them out of trouble. That should be the end of it. No, that should not be the end of it. The defense union's job is to keep attacking the regulators where they are getting it wrong. Or if you are saying that this doctor is being targeted, is being maliciously referred, you cannot simply defend the doctor at that point. You have to actually go on the offensive. You have to threaten them with employment tribunal. You have to threaten them with high court action. And that bears result. I can tell you that bears result. I can actually produce a series of cases, and will be doing so, where this approach bears result. The trust back down. They don't actually go after the doctor if the defense is coming after them. So you have, as part of the MHPS, you should be prepared to raise questions of whistleblowing, discrimination, breach of contract. All these should be raised by you on behalf of the doctor. The trust should not be allowed to carry on attacking the doctor through MHPS, and which you know is flawed. It's targeting the doctor. It's malicious quite often. It's apparently malicious. What do the defense unions generally do, or for that matter, the trade unions? What do they do? Well, don't go on the offensive, because it will look bad if you go to the GMC. It'll appear that you lack insight. How can it be right? So that, I think, is a big problem at the moment. The defense unions, the trade unions, both are guilty of this. That is why we are not getting change in the system as we should, as rapidly we should, because pick up a few cases and go after the GMC. And I have gone after the GMC, and they back down and they run away. I'm telling you. So that's the approach to be taken. And it's possible to do it. It's not going to be exorbitantly expensive, but it's of course going to cost some money, but it's not going to cost more than what the BMA and the trade union fees are combined. It's going to be less than that. And it will produce the same sort of combined professional defense. I know that BMA is looking into that model, but it's the pace with which things are happening, which it doesn't really fill me with a lot of confidence. I mean, it is accepted that there's a problem with the model, but the reform may take many years, and that is where I don't feel very comfortable. And I am actually thinking of something on that line myself, which is possible outside of the BMA and the defense unions.
Okay. Now it's already coming up to 1:45, so I'll leave one question to the end. I mean, do you think the GMC, and I'll ask each of the panelists to come to you, should be reformed or just abolished? We start again. I mean, what's your view on this, Chand? I'll start with you.
I'm very clear about this. It's not just the GMC that needs to be completely reformed. The whole regulatory pathway process needs complete reform. I'm absolutely clear. No more tinkering on the edges. And I'll say a little more in my closing words.
Okay. Raj, what do you think?
I think the GMC, if you abolish the GMC, I mean, there are so many problems that it should be abolished. But if you replace it with something like GMC, it's not going to be the answer.
All right. Rifat, what's your view?
I think I wanted to use this opportunity to address something that many people have raised in the chat, which is there's no transparency, there's no information. Yes, the GMC should be replaced, yes, the trust processes for discipline must be changed, but that requires, there's an awful lot, there's a lot of information about the GMC, so we talk about the GMC. There's a lot of pain with the GMC, so we talk about the GMC. But doctors have to understand, I did a survey with the help of the BMA actually, of all trusts, that because of GDPR, the trusts hide completely their information. They can legally not share information. And so before we can do anything, and a lot of people have said, can the BMA survey what's going on? Very difficult, because everything is hidden under the radar by GDPR. But yes, I think everything should be reformed. I think the GMC is, I don't know who runs it, I don't know what it's run for, but it is not run to help and support doctors. That I know.
Okay.
It needs to be flattened and started again.
Okay, Phil.
Let me just take unmute. It's reform of the law that's needed rather than reform of the GMC, because we've got the GMC, the law is still there. It's, for me, it's about the openness and transparency, and if that said it for me, the professional curiosity in the workplace. It's, you know, we haven't sorted out who gets fed into this minster at the start. You know, it's, and that's where we have to be at, because it's stopping people getting into this legal process unnecessarily, sorting out relationships, making sure that what is vexatious is pushed back on very quickly. The difficulty is that, you know, the more independent and external you take something, the longer the process then seems to take. So the BMA, for example, and part of it's trying to make its own processes fair, send all complaints out externally now to be independently assessed and worked through by a law firm, and that just seems to make the process even more complicated. So, you know, these things need to be evolved to be fit for purpose. We need to define what that purpose is.
Okay, and Sam, finally you. I mean, you've already said it should be.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I was just about to say that I've already said that.
Okay,
but,
that's fine. Yeah.
Of course, on the other end is, can I appeal to some of the doctors in these responsible officer and medical director roles as well? You know, behave yourselves, folks. The word responsible means you have to care for the doctors in your care. That means you don't refer them to the General Medical Council as first line, or to investigators, or whatever other silly measures you think you need. You handle it in-house. If it goes to the GMC, you have failed.
Yeah, right. Okay, fine. So I have to really close this off now, and I'm going to ask now Chan to sort of bring this together for us, and then I'll turn to VG for a thank you. So Chan, all yours now. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I want to start by thanking Viji, who, from the depths of unimaginable grief and bereavement, has had the determination to do good and to make sure that no one else suffers the same fate as her late husband. Last year, when she held this conference, I actually traveled and she held it in her hometown. And I saw firsthand that not only had she lost her husband, but a community had lost a very much loved person, because the whole the community of an Indian community that she's part of had also attended. I want to thank Anis, because he chaired the meeting. But you know, I believe all human beings are born with a sense of justice and fairness, and they get contaminated as they grow up and become adults. But Anis has retained that sense of fairness in everything he does, and integrity. And it's been an honor to have known you, Anis, and thank you for chairing this and have spoken out about these issues for so long. I want to also make special mention of IFIT, and I hope that everyone who is here today, and also more widely, can be circulated with IFIT's documentary. I mean, you know that IFIT is a doctor. She's not a film. She wasn't born to be a film producer, but the film is just absolutely touching, beautiful, and shows poetically why things have to change. So please, let's circulate that link, and thank you, IFAT. You know, what we're really talking about today is nothing we're not asking for a lot. We're asking for a basic human rights to be honored. You know, just look on Wikipedia, a basic human right to be treated innocent until proved guilty. And we know that is not patently the case in the way our regulatory system works. When you hear doctor after doctor feeling that they're guilty first and have to somehow prove their innocence. We're talking about words like compassion, being treated and having a regulatory system that's proportionate. These are basic rights. And I saw in the chat mention about Don Berwick, and he was horrified at the NHS. This is an international patient safety expert who said that the NHS is a climate of fear. And this is what we're talking about. And it's not just affecting individual doctors, it's affecting patient safety in the NHS, as we've heard with cases like Letby and so forth. I want to also thank those who shared their personal experiences. Joe, Clive, Sasha, and Omar. You know, you were brave to be so honest. And it's left me, and I'm sure everyone else, feeling both moved but extremely angry in equal measure. You know, I'm just so sorry. And I think the question was asked, you know, what could sort this? Nothing will sort this out for you. You have been through experiences that you really should not have gone through. And I'm really sorry about that. And which is why I think this charter is vitally important. But I don't know about you, but I think that, you know, we have to, the charter is just the beginning. We have to see change. The charter is a set of principles that we all can use as a hook. But until things change, there will be more Joes, more Clives, more Sashas, more Omars. And whilst, and of course, there'll be more doctors who will take their lives. And there have been more doctors who've taken their lives since Viji's late husband. In fact, 2 last year that we came across. And I think what also came out of that today is that there is so much probably hidden pain. People on the chat, so much hidden pain that we don't even hear about, of people's lives totally destroyed, their sense of self-esteem completely wrecked, and so forth. So there's a huge reason why this needs to be tackled that goes beyond the anecdotes we've heard. I believe strongly that we mustn't lose sight of the fact that this isn't about just GMC reform. Because if you actually hear about the stories from Joe, Clive, Sasha, and Omar to some degree, they actually started at a point well before a referral was made to the GMC. You have to tackle discrimination and you have to tackle unfair treatment in the workplace. And that's at a pre-GMC referral stage. And you have to tackle the role of responsible officers and medical directors. And people are saying, Samantha's saying, well, actually, you know, can you be better? Well, actually, I wonder how they're appointed. No one should be appointed without demonstrating they have proper understanding of what inclusive and diverse leadership and no blame leadership looks like. These people have not been appointed on those attributes. And I've come across cases pre-referral where in fact the GMC liaison officer, someone mentioned this, had actually advised the trust to make a referral. That whole issue, the pre-GMC pathway, needs to be addressed. I mentioned earlier about the case building amongst employers, which is why I think that that pre-referral stage is vital. And that's where trade unions come in, because trade unions have to be there and show the member, I have someone who's going to fight for me, and please don't play around with what, and in fact, it's the weakest in any hierarchy who will be scapegoated most, which is why I believe many IMGs and ethnic minority doctors suffer the worst fate, because they feel least able to stand up for themselves, and they will be scapegoated. We then get onto the GMC itself and the reform. The decision to investigate needs independent scrutiny too. Because if you look at the example of Joe, it was a GP who referred her. That wouldn't have been picked up that's not a hospital trust issue. There are going to be vexatious complaints directly by patients. So at that point, when the GMC investigates, you need to have, in my view, some external scrutiny to ensure whether or not that case should go further, and proper, more than professional curiosity, proper curiosity to hear the side of the person being complained about before it goes further. What you have now is an investigation, and then you involve the complainant after they've received that notification, which can be so destructive. You then, once you get into the investigation, the GMC has all the power. It pays for huge, at huge cost, investigators, which the complainant, the doctor, has no access to. So you actually develop a momentum of a case against the doctor during the investigation phase, and that information isn't divulged to the doctor often. So there's an inbuilt system that's wrong. I would also reform and get rid of the whole idea of barristers and the adversarial system that we have. I've yet to meet a lawyer who's not hardwired, a barrister that's not hardwired to win. When they are actually putting a complainant in the dock, they're not actually thinking about withdrawing their case because they suddenly hear some truth coming out. Their whole, the whole momentum is about winning a case, and the entire investigation and the barristers they employ are around, and they're hardwired to find fault. And if you go and look at the Employment Tribunal judgment against Omar Karim, you know, he may have, the GMC may have won the Employment Tribunal on a technical matter, but just read the original employment. It talks about how the investigation is a witch hunt to case build against the doctor, because that's what they're paid to do. You need to, that needs reform. It needs to go. It needs to be a proper process where you're trying to look for the truth, not trying to look to win a case against a doctor. The burden of proof. I've come across a doctor recently I was trying to support, and others here may have, who's lost his career based upon no evidence, but the word of a patient against him, and based upon not the civil standard, not the unreasonable doubt. No one's life career should end upon that threshold which has been raised before. And finally, just about race discrimination. We, and I think it's really important to make it clear. You heard from 3 case studies, people who are not of an ethnic minority. So the GMC needs reform in its own right before you even get into race discrimination. But when you get into race discrimination, you see that added dimension of certain groups of doctors who are treated even more unfairly. And again, go and look at Omar Karim's tribunal, and you will see, it actually used the word, the GMC is infected with racial discrimination processes. And I don't need to repeat all the race discrimination statistics, but that is just another moral wrong that needs to be addressed. I've mentioned before that I do think, and I hope Phil will, and I know Phil's very committed to this, we have to do something as a trade union, the BMA, and as does the HCSA and Doctors Unite. We have to step in right at the beginning so that no doctor actually gets as far as the sort of processes we've heard earlier. So my next steps, I hope, outside this meeting, is to translate this charter into specific actions. Some will need legislative change, but we owe it to the doctors of the future to see that legislative change. We shouldn't be thinking just because it won't happen in a year's time, there's no point doing it. We have to fight for what needs to be done now, and we have to fight for what needs to be done for decades to come. And I would want to make this meeting today compulsory viewing to a large audience, because it was the most powerful meeting I've attended in a very, very long time. I want to thank Viji for being the brainchild behind today's meeting. The GMC should watch it, hospital trust boards should watch it, patients should watch it. I think this has been an extremely profound meeting. I want to thank all of you for having attended, and thank you very much for the opportunity for all of us to come together as an alliance. Let's call it an alliance of doctors and others to see the human rights of doctors achieved in a highly pressurized environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chan. That was really, really quite impressive, and the way you summarized everything. So thank you so much for that. Now, Vijay has asked, could you all turn on your videos? before she just turns to thank us, to thank people, and everyone. I mean, these videos, like Charles, are very powerful. And my understanding is that Doctor's Voice is going to be where these places are going to be placed, and it'll be publicized once they got consent from the people who've made them. So I think that'll be very, very powerful. So they're all on video. Over to you.
So let me start. Let me share a small incident with you all. Okay. So I was frantically searching I wanted to create a digital platform for the voice of the doctors. And it is not an easy thing. Big, powerful organization take years of planning and delivery, and they will design something and design an apple and deliver an orange. That happens in our digital world as well. And I was frantically searching for an engineer. I don't have much of resources to develop this. It is all my own time, personal time, and I have to do everything in a very, very small budgets. And last week, it was all together, but it was kind of in the end state where I need to finish it in such a way that I need to resolve some critical issues. And I had to pay the daily consultancy charges for good engineers to work from across the continents. And things were not resolving in one day. One girl started helping me, and she was working for me. The next day, one day she couldn't finish the job. The next day, I have this engineer working voluntarily for me in the midnight. It was in an American time. She was working from Minneapolis. I completely do not know her, and she is a stranger. And she said, I asked her, why are you doing this? And she said to me, I live in Minneapolis, and our states in America have a huge shortage of doctors. And she said her personal story, where she went to meet her doc. They call their GPS doc, as usual American terminology. And the doctor her doc is a very compassionate person. And she was very calmly addressing all her queries, and she was helping her. And during that meeting with her doc, the engineer felt the doctor's face was not looking very good. And but she was very hesitant to ask, because the relationship between a doc and a patient is not that smooth, and every minute in the American doctors' calendars are precious and counted. And so she had to leave. And after a week, she tried to contact her doctor again. And she came to know from the receptionist that the doc took her life along with her disabled child due to a daunting patient allegation. And this engineer stated that many doctors across America are killing themselves due to these many inappropriate patient allegations. And now the patients are suffering in terms of no gynecology support available to even abort a still baby, and they had to be there for keeping them for 2 or 3 months. And that is the case the certain communities within America are put into. A stranger contributing to the voice of the doctor gave me an assurance that I'm not crazy. I'm not driven by emotions, and this is the right cause. And for the right cause, I always feel that the right help will come at the right time from different directions. And that is what the voice of the doctor is standing in front of you as a community. And this conference would not have happened if we didn't have such a great speakers and leaders. My heartfelt thanks to Phil Banfield, Chan Nagpal, Anis, Raj, Ifat, Joe, Shasha, Clive, Omar. I just can't find words to thank you all. And we had DDPU's Raj's secretary giving her time voluntarily to refine the contents of this website. And we had IFAD's technical support teams, engineers working to edit few videos. And we have Priya, who is, I I know this girl until last night around 1 o'clock in the midnight, because I didn't know something to solve in the Zoom conference. And she was there helping me, and she's here for last 3 hours helping me in the tech support to run everything smoothly in the right way. I just can't believe this is what, when we are fighting for the right cause, with the right intention, the right people, and the right energy and the right emotion will come and join you. And that is what it is. Maybe it is destined to happen. This voice of doctors is destined to happen. And it is all in your hands now. Above all, I need to thank my husband's friends who must be here in the videos on. And I hope so. But since it's a huge conference, I can't see everybody or pin everyone in. And well-wishers who had relentlessly worked to disseminate this invitation to everyone. At times, I had to throng all these personal WhatsApp groups with all these requests to join. And it gets harder. And this community should be spread, the word should be spread virally without much effort. And that is where it is a journey. I want you all to move it and take it forward. And last but not the least, I would thank all the attendees, all of you. So many people have stayed for so long, for 3 hours. It's a Sunday afternoon nap time. You have sacrificed it and you are here listening. And this is what all of you attendees, because of all of you attendees, this conference is successful. And without you all, nothing is going to happen. And please find the digital portal, voiceofthedoctors.org, which is aimed to promote the doctors in professional distress, to connect, to speak, to communicate, to campaign, and disseminate the pain undergone by each and every one of these professionals in distress. And it is a hard thing. We will try our best. Every help that comes in its way is important. Anyone who can vet the things. It is a collaborative effort. It takes a long time to just move one stone, but we are doing some small things. That is what it is all. And all your thoughts and feedback are welcome. We are seeing the entire chat messages, and there is a series of talks that is being scheduled. And it is going to be not a long talks like this. It is just going to be small discussions or a coffee with Ifat or things like that. And we will have some small steps, but we will build our journey towards. And everything has to be this. If this needs to be successful, it needs to be done through volunteers. And all of your efforts is what is needed. And it is all left to you. And it is a journey. We will sail together. And let's see where it moves forward. And thanks again, all of you, for attending this conference. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Viji. And thank you all for attending. As I said, it's a long afternoon, but thank you. And I think these will all be uploaded, these videos, once we get permission from everyone. And I hope that this will be a very, I know it will be. It's such a powerful chance that it's a very, very powerful message that these stories have made. And I think we can go forward from here. So thank you all for attending, and have a good evening now. Take care then, and bye-bye.